This is Michael Cowen, and welcome to Trial Lawyer Nation.
He helps us pan for the gold inside ourselves.
You need to have grit. I mean, a lot of this is grit.
I feel like I've been made a better lawyer.
They're talking about something that's real to them.
You have to be really careful not to be Goliath.
They saved a bunch of lives and changed society forever.
But let's just begin the conversation.
Welcome to Trial Lawyer Nation, your source for guidance to win bigger verdicts, get more cases, and manage your practice. And now, here's your host, noteworthy author, sought-after speaker, and renowned trial lawyer, Michael Cowen.
Today on Trial Lawyer Nation, we have a great friend of mine, Alex Begum. I've known Alex his whole career. I saw him get out of law school and just start a firm with a couple friends right out of the box. And I've seen him over the years develop as a trial lawyer and at the same time develop his firm from just three guys that just got out of school to multiple offices in multiple cities, multi-million-dollar ad campaigns, incredible success, and I thought it would be useful to share, how he did it. So we're going to talk about his story and how he did that, how he both tries cases and keeps getting better while running a law firm successfully, and some of the books, especially a book called Don't Eat the Bruises by Keith Mitnick, that's really helped him learn and apply things. And finally, a hot topic, something that we've been doing in our firm and he's had great success with, is not using your medical bills at trial, not trying the case without the past medical. So I hope you enjoy listening to this as much as I enjoy talking to Alex. Today on Trial Lawyer Nation, we have a good friend of mine. He's a rare combination of being a great lawyer and a great businessman, Alex Begum. Alex, how you doing this morning?
I'm doing good, Mike. Thank you.
So people that know who you are, and at least people in Texas know you've got a big practice, multiple cities, lots of advertising. You also try cases and do well. I want to talk a little bit about how you didn't start that way, like how you started and how you kind of build up.
Yeah, so I didn't really know that I wanted to be a lawyer even after I graduated from law school. I didn't know any lawyers. My parents really didn't hang out with lawyers, and I guess in retrospect that was a good thing because it forced me to pursue an MBA at the same time that I was getting a law degree, thinking that if I didn't like law, I would have the fallback of a MBA in finance, and my undergrad was in finance. And so, looking back at it, I think that one of the things I was able to do is bring a business perspective to the practice of law, and that for me made it very challenging and very rewarding. That in a sense, I was able to pursue my passion in business and finance, and that's kind of what I had focused on early on in my career as a student, and then kind of bring both of those things together over time.
Yeah, well, the IRS definitely considers us in the finance business because they say everything we spend on cases is a loan to the client or investment we can't deduct from our taxes.
That's just one of the craziest things. You can spend $2 million on expenses in a year, make $1 million, and still have to pay $1 million in taxes, or
yeah, everything you make.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
But it's the law, so you just got to deal with it.
Yeah.
So talk about, you get out of law school then, you've got your MBA, you've got your your law degree.
Yeah.
What do you do first?
Well, so I had two friends that were a few years older than me, and I'm the one that kind of brought them together, and both of them, one of them was Beto Tijerina, who had been at Cox & Smith here in San Antonio back when it was Cox & Smith, and then David Willis, who had graduated about a year or two before I had as well. And I kind of brought them together and said, guys, let's go to the Brownsville and let's just open up shop and see what happens. And one of the things that I had done in law school is they had forced me to do a business plan. And I thought that was kind of dumb at the time, but in retrospect also it was one of the greatest things that they forced me to do in law school. And so I said, look, I've got this business plan, and I really think that I can bring some of my financial know-how into this practice of law, and let me do the financing and the admin, and let's open up our doors and see what happens. And and that's what we did.
So was it just a booming success from day one?
Oh, yeah, right. So at the time, I turned down a job that had offered me $70,000 a year starting, and it was at a defense firm in Amarillo, and I'm sure I would have been. I'm sure that that life would have taken me in a whole different direction. But we started in our first year. We each made, I want to say, $29,000. And our second year, we all made somewhere in the area of $50,000. And our third year, it was right under 80 or 90,000. And so we didn't break the $100,000 mark until I think it was year 4 or 5. So it definitely did not come easy at all.
I guess, but you learned lessons doing that and eventually make a little bit more than that.
Yeah.
How did you go? What kind of work were you taking when you first started?
So when we first opened our doors, it was anything that we could bring in the door. I mean, literally. We did things like child custody and divorce and criminal and corporate. And luckily, David Willis really liked criminal and civil, and so he handled that. Humberto had done a lot of transactional work, and he was very competent in that area, and so we did a lot of transactional work. And I just kind of found a niche in family and in little civil cases like small car wrecks or slip and falls that would come in the door also.
And you eventually transitioned to pretty much all personal injury.
Yeah, so it was interesting. You probably know Trey Martinez pretty well, and Tony Martinez down in the Valley. And it was interesting how I got my start in really doing car wreck cases, and it was first as a defense lawyer. And the way that worked is he had a client who owned several managing agencies, these cross-border policies that they were selling, the Villarreal brothers there in the Valley. And one of the Villarreal brothers was being sued by an ex-employee. And Trey and Tony were representing them, and they had some kind of conflict and said, hey, can you help this guy out? And so we got the case, and I looked at it, met with him, and we actually filed counterclaims against the employee. And he said, look, what I'm not going to do is pay this guy any money because of all these reasons. And so, long story short, we went and tried the case there in Janet Leal's court. It was a week-long trial, and we got a $75,000 verdict against the plaintiff.
Oh, wow.
In the case. And he really liked what he saw. And like the next week, he said, would you all mind doing car wreck defense for, I own managing general agencies. And we said, yeah, sure, we'll take some files. We worked out some terms. And like 2 weeks later, a van shows up with like 80 boxes.
Oh, my God.
And these were cases that were in pre-lit stage, the middle of litigation. He basically had fired a firm and given and directed that firm to send us all of the cases. And so we just kind of jumped into it. And David and I really handled that litigation for about, I would say we handled those cases for about 2-3 years. And it was work that I wasn't very happy doing. And I saw that lawyers who were on the plaintiff side who were not very effective or good were getting paid money. And I said, I'm on the wrong side of this deal.
And so what made you pick the PI field as opposed to the other kinds of cases you had to specialize in?
So I think it was a combination of several factors. One is I saw the limitless potential in the PI world versus other kinds of law where you're capped by hourly limitations on a day, or the idea of doing mundane transactional work is just something I couldn't stomach. And then I was exposed to family law, and I hated doing family law.
Me too.
Yeah. And so just by a process of elimination, I said, this is really what I like doing. After having been exposed to different practice areas and then seeing the potential in it, I said, this is really somewhere that I want to focus in. And really my background with my father being an immigrant into this country, kind of always being someone that beat all odds, kind of the little guy, he always raised me in such a way to fear, kind of the big guy, the corporate interest. He hated insurance companies for lots of different reasons. And so I think a lot of that upbringing also, learning about my father's family and the Holocaust and everything else, it just felt right that I was representing people that had been victimized in some way.
And so how did you go from someone that had maybe done some defense work, kind of a few little ones, to becoming someone that was good at handling personal injury claims?
So I tried about half a dozen defense cases, and we were pretty successful doing that. And then what I started doing was going around knocking on lawyers' doors and saying, I really want to focus in on this. I used to do defense work, and that kind of buys you credibility.
Yeah.
And it says, this guy's been around. He knows how to handle these cases. And there was about 3 or 4 lawyers, one in particular, Abel Toscano. I don't know if you ever heard of him there in the Valley. So Abel, at the time that I was kind of going into this, was shutting down his doors. He was having some health problems, and he had a ton of files. And he said, Alex, these are all the files that I can't resolve. And he said, have any one you want, or all of them. And we must have taken 40, 50 files of cases that had been there, some of them for 3-4 years, that had been filed but kind of no follow-up. And I just went and tried a bunch of cases, little ones, and I lost some, and I won some, and I hit some out of the park. And it was a lot of fun. And after doing that for a while, you just kind of get known for, hey, this is a guy that's doing a lot of PI, right? And it makes it easier to get business in the door.
So you're getting the business in the door. You're getting trial experience. Is there anything you did besides just trying cases to go and learn and get better? And what have you done there to improve yourself? Because you've gone from knowing nothing about it to being really good at trying them.
Yeah, I think that several big things happened to me. And the first one is I had some really good mentors that I reached out to. And for example, Ed Stapleton.
My old boss, yeah.
Yeah. And, Ed, I went up to Ed and said, hey, Ed, can you come try these cases with me? Some of the first few ones that I tried. And Ed and I must have tried 8 or 9 cases together. And we would literally split the work 50-50, right? He never was the kind of person that said, hey, I'm gonna take over this case. He would just go in there and try them with me. We had a ton of fun doing it, and I learned so much from Ed. And Ed's really the one that said, hey, you really have to go and learn the Jerry Spence method. And he's the one that got me interested in going to the college. And
the Trial Lawyers College.
The Trial Lawyers College. And so then I went to TLC. And I continue to always, and even today, I'm always looking for the best seminar and for the best techniques that I can pick up, and I'm always willing to learn. And I'm reading a lot about all kinds of different areas in our world of PI psychology books that I think maybe have some kind of overlap with picking juries or presenting trials. And through the years, we've had these great pioneers in our line of work, like guys like David Ball and Rick Friedman, that have been putting out some amazing research, in terms of really approaching our field from a very psychological way of presenting our cases to juries. Don Keenan is another one that I think is brilliant.
Yeah, I think right now is one of the best times to become a trial lawyer because, when I started, there's a Trial Lawyers College and that was good, but most of the really, really great trial lawyers, they'd speak every now and then, but they kind of kept a lot of it to themselves. They might not even have known why they've won. There's so much great work going on right now, and it's being offered out there. There's so many people sharing and teaching what they've learned, what they know. Trial guides came up, and there's just the amount of good literature coming out there on how to do this stuff. The amount of research being shared is just, I think, unique. It's never been like this before. So I think. Yeah,
and I think we've realized as a profession that if 95% of us are being kicked around at trial, that it's affecting the other 15% that are actually doing well at trial. And that is that as a profession, whether it's regional in a certain part of Texas or the state, if as a profession we all do better, we all pick ourselves up, and we all start fighting against some of these tactics that insurance companies want to use to drive down value, I think at some point the profession itself realized, hey, we're helping ourselves by helping others.
Yeah. So what do you think right now some of the better seminars out there are for someone wanting to learn how to be a great trial lawyer?
So I really think that the research behind the reptile is fascinating. And I'm not saying go and ingest it and accept all of it, but there's some really powerful things in there. If you haven't read, Rick Friedman's Rules of the Road, I think you're doing yourself a huge disservice.
I totally agree with that.
There's a great book, and I can't remember the author. You're probably going to correct me on this, but Don't Eat the Bruises.
Yeah, Keith Mitnick.
Keith Mitnick. I think that is a revolutionary book. If you don't do anything else in that book, the most amazing, valuable thing from that book is just the chapter on the terminology, what words to use in a trial and what words that you should never use in a trial.
Yeah, the two phrases, one picked and paid for the defense expert, and doubt is not an out for preponderance of the evidence. I have made so much money off those two phrases. I mean, that book has been worth 1,000, 2,000 times what I paid for it.
Oh, absolutely. And if anybody that is, just visualizing, for example, the word injury, which I used to use, versus the word damage. And so when you use the word brain injury or, an injury of the spine, the word almost implies that there's going to be a recovery.
Right.
Whereas you say brain damaged or spinal damage, that those words are permanent, they imply permanency. And so those kinds of words, terminology, what to use, what not to use, even basic ones. I see lawyers in our profession making this mistake all the time. They go into a trial and they're calling the accident an accident.
Oh my gosh, I hate that.
I've seen my associates using that word in depositions, and I cringe. You're implying that there was no way to prevent it. It's a non-preventable event. Part of what I do now on these cases is I depose the cop, and I've talked to cops that are in police academies, and now I use this. I tell the cop, hey, does the word accident appear anywhere on this crash report? No, sir, it doesn't. And why isn't that? And they actually tell you it's because an accident means that there's no contributing factors. A crash means that someone was responsible.
Yeah.
And the cop is telling you that. And so then when the defense lawyer starts to use the word accident, I just completely turned around on them. I said, words matter, and being truthful matters. And the defense lawyer is trying to use a word that's not even on this crash report, and even the defense lawyers, after getting beat up a little bit, start using the word crash.
Well, that's awesome.
Which
is a mistake on their part, by the way.
Of course.
One thing you've done recently and had some real success with is not putting in the medical bills at trial. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so that was really one of the scariest things I've ever done as a trial lawyer. And I remember, and I got to give you credit, Mike, first, right? Because you're the one that tried it before a lot of us had ever tried that. And what we had been seeing is we were going in some of these cases with $15,000, $20,000, $30,000 in medicals. And, we were really anchoring ourselves down to an award in or around that range, or 2 times that range. And even then, you thought 2 times meds was a great victory, right?
But no.
But absolutely not. And what we saw, and I'll tell you, I give you credit for trying it, but I went to a seminar for Mark Lanier.
Yeah, because I didn't come up with it. I copied other people.
Yeah, and I had actually heard it at Mark Lanier's seminar. I think you and I actually had emailed about it because I was at the seminar, and I said, man, I just saw this great seminar. And I can't remember the name of the law firm, but it was a law firm in New Jersey. And Mark Lanier actually invited him to go and speak. And this law firm basically went out and did a test study. And they said, let's do full-blown mock trials where we hire a real defense lawyer to try the case. And we're going to try it 2 different ways. We're going to try this exact case, exact arguments, and we're going to present and submit our medicals on it, and then we're going to do the exact same case but without medicals and see, and we're going to have 2 panels in each mock trial. And the response and the results were staggering. On the trials where they didn't submit medicals, the verdicts were, high 6 figures, and in one case, in one panel, 7 figures. On a case that you would have been happy with 40 grand usually in our old mindset. The other thing that I'll tell you that I've tested this, and I've had 3 or 4 trials so far, and my associates have had another 2 or 3 trials. So we've tested it about 7 times. And knock on wood, we have not been poured out yet. And every single case, we've had high 6-figure outcomes on meds as low as $4,000, $5,000, in medicals.
Why do you think that is?
I think there's a lot of reasons. For one, it really turns the focus of the lawyer, the plaintiff, on value driving damage elements. And so, for example, if you don't have to argue about medicals, you're forced to then put on evidence about past and future pain and suffering and past and future impairment, because that's really the only 4 things you got left. And how do you get there? Well, we get there not only through client testimony, but we get there through, what I like to call moaners, groaners on behalf of the plaintiff.
Friends, family, coworkers.
Absolutely. Everybody else proves up your damages for you. And I'm really careful, and this is something that I learned from the Jerry Spence College, is we really want to present a 360-degree perspective of how this man's life or woman's life was affected. So we get someone that gives us the perspective from work, the perspective from time with the family, the perspective with them giving back to the community in some form or fashion, whether it's at church or at some other organization that he or she used to volunteer at and they can't do that anymore. And then from the perspective of the personal hobbies and things that were important to that individual, and how every single aspect of their life was affected without doubling up on any one area, because that also gets to be a little burdensome for the jury. And so it focuses you to really, really, spend a lot of time on the value drivers. It also takes out the stink of whether you have a paid versus incurred issue, or whether the lawyer and the doctor.
This is all 50 states. So what's the paid versus incurred issue?
Oh, I gotcha. So, in Texas, it used to be that someone went to the hospital would bill $30,000. You could go in and present the $30,000 bill. Now, if there's a Medicaid or Medicare payment that brings down the $30,000 bill to, say, $3,000, now all we can do is present the $3,000.
And now they're even trying, when there's not any health insurance and your client's stuck with a $30,000 lien, presenting evidence that it should have only been $3,000. The hospital's overcharging, and medical billing practices are so inconsistent, and it's just like an Alice in Wonderland type world when you try to get into how they come up with their bills, the prices of them. I think that the more we're not having to defend medical billing practices, the easier it is to try a case.
For sure. I mean, in Texas, at least, I think we're going down a really bad slippery slope. I think that the 100+ year rule of collateral source, if it's ever been in jeopardy, it's now in our environment. And whether you like it or not, I think that trying cases without medicals are going to become more and more frequent by necessity, if not so much by choice.
I think, ironically, the effect of all that is we're going to end up with bigger recoveries.
That's right. I think we are. And now it's going to also, for the large volume practices, the downside is that a lot more cases are going to have to be tried.
For a while. And then I think then values will get reset. And
I think that's right. And you think so, at least.
Yeah.
But the other thing it does is it takes out you having to argue for, a $5,000 bill. I mean, you spend so much money, time, and effort, and then you get into questions like, doctor, how many clients have you treated, Mr. Begum, if some judges allow that, or, your LOP practice, and what is an LOP?
And LOP is a letter of protection. That's where the doctor's agreeing to wait until the end of the case to get paid since the client doesn't have another way to pay them.
Right. And some judges allow defense lawyers to pervert that and turn it into, well, you're tied to the case because if there's no recovery in trial, then you don't get paid. And so, you're being influenced. And I think that's, that testimony should never see a light of day. But depending on what jurisdiction you're in, those are the kinds of arguments you'll hear. And the no medical model of trying a case eliminates all of that stink. I mean, it just gets out of the case completely.
It also takes the defense out of where they like to be, which is trying to make us the villain, fighting over the doctors and the lawyers, trying to gin up medical bills, and puts it into where they're uncomfortable, which is what the real human effects of what they've done to our people.
That's right. And the jurors that are back there that want to fight for you, that want to fight for your client, if they even get to awarding you your bills, they're so tired, they're so worn out just to get you there. But by the time they get down to the other elements of damages, they've already kind of used their chips, so to speak, against those bad jurors that didn't want to give you anything to begin with.
Yeah, I agree. I'm all for it. And, there's still cases where the bills are high enough where I'm not brave enough to not put them in. But more and more, we even have a case with $280,000 in medical bills that we're really thinking about not putting them in because it's in a jurisdiction where the defense is going to be able to argue, well, this one pain management doctor charged $135,000. Maybe this should only be $30,000. And if they're allowed to get into that argument, I think my jurors then are fighting me to get $280,000, not fighting to get me $4 million, $5 million.
I think that's absolutely right, and I've seen very good lawyers. I walked into a case the other day in Cameron County. It was a med mal case, and I actually heard a lawyer put up evidence of a funeral bill.
Oh wow!
Like really, you want to get a $10,000 past funeral bill in front of a jury? Yeah, it makes absolutely no sense whatsoever.
Yeah, it almost tells them you don't believe your case is worth millions, or why would you bother with the $10,000?
Right.
And it also anchors down. Once you have one small number, it can anchor everything else down.
Yeah.
One thing that's kind of unique to your practice is I see most lawyers that run a firm as big as yours. You do a lot of advertising. You bring in a lot of work. Pretty much just run the practice and serve as like the face of the firm. You actually get in there and try cases.
I do.
How do you do that?
Well, it's difficult. I would say that the admin part of my practice probably takes 50-60% of my time. And there's no way I could do the trial work without really great associates and really great teams that know exactly how I like things, know exactly how I want things set up before I have to go and take a big depot or go in and try a case and get ready for a case. A lot of that work has been done. I also feel very strongly about this, that if I'm going to go on TV and put out my face and say, you need to trust me and you need to hire me to do something, I feel strongly that I need to deliver. And I'm not faulting them. Look, business is business, but there are lawyers that are major advertisers that have never tried a PI case. And I think that there's something hollow about that. And I want to be able to look people in the face and say, hey, you hired me, you saw me, and I'm going to be the one that's going to give you the results.
So how do you manage your time? Do you have any kind of internal rules for yourself or something on how you make time to both do the administrative right so the firm doesn't fall apart and everything keeps running right, and to dedicate the time it takes to get ready for trials?
Well, I wish my life was that organized, right, where I can sit down and say I'm going to spend 25% of my day on this and 75% of my day on that. But the reality is that you just have to deal with things as they come at you and try and prioritize as best you can. And so I usually am handling, some of the bigger files in our office in terms of taking expert depots, big hearings, outcome determinative type hearings. And if there is a case, even if it's a low impact or moderate impact case or a case that we originally don't assign a lot of value to, I'll usually jump into that case kind of towards the end part. And so if that makes any sense, that's kind of how I prioritize my time, at least with cases, is I'm not working up the low value cases myself, but if they have to get to trial, I'll go and sit with an associate, a younger lawyer, and make sure that they're not screwing up the case, because for that client, that is their most important case.
Absolutely. And do you have any kind of systems to ensure that the cases that you're not personally involved with, they're kind of working the way they're supposed to be?
Yes. So we have developed kind of exhaustive checklists that, we use a program called Needles, and there are things that must be done on every single case. And that means that if there's a liability dispute, you have to take the cop depot, right, in case they don't show up for trial, which is pretty common sometimes. If we have a situation where they're witnesses, you have to take the witness depositions. I mean, I see lawyers that show up to trial sometimes and they don't even bother to call the witnesses. And so,
wow. Have you read the Checklist Manifesto?
I haven't.
I haven't either. I've heard about it.
Yeah.
I've bought it and haven't read it. But one thing that, I think it's when I never even got my pilot's license, but when I started taking some flying lessons and got into aviation, I realized that, pilots, no matter how many times they've flown the plane, a professional pilot will go through the checklist before, they'll do before their pre-trip inspection, they check things off. Before they take off, they check things off. When they're landing, they go through the checklist. If something goes wrong, what do I do as a reminder? And these are professionals, and the airline pilots still do it. And then, doctors don't like doing it, but there's studies that show when they force doctors to go through checklists on surgeries, bad outcomes went way down. And, I think lawyers a lot of times want to say, well, I'm a lawyer. This is an art, not a science. It's not McDonald's making a burger. I don't need to go through checklists. And I know at my firm, that's fine, but if you want to work here, you have to follow the checklist, because that's how we make sure we don't screw up.
Well, that's how you also maintain quality control over your practice.
Yeah.
There are certain things that are just imperative. Getting the crash or the crash estimates from the body shops show us so much damage that you can't see with the eye. I tried a case a few months ago where there was barely any visible damage, but you took off the over bumper, and there was a ton of damage to the under bumper and the under bumper assembly. When you looked at the estimate, there was actually frame damage that had occurred. That's not something you could have ever been able to talk about at trial if you didn't have the body shop estimates.
The other good thing about systems is when you just kind of automatically do all the little things, then you can really focus on the big things instead of always worried about, oh, wait, what about this? Well, did I get that estimate? Well, oh, crap, we have 15 days till the discovery deadline. Do we need to go depose that cop? No, it's the system takes care of that, and then you can think of the big things like, how did this affect my client? Who can talk about this? Go to their house, spend time with them. It actually, once you embrace the checklist method, it really frees you up to use your creativity. It's not what people think originally when they resist it, but it really does work.
Well, and the other thing is that, like in your firm, Mike, you've got a lot of lawyers, and you have a certain amount of success because of your methodologies, the way that you've done things in your practice, and the way that you approach cases. And what lawyers don't understand when they come work for you, and sometimes when they come work for me, is they think that they're going to come to a law firm and say, I'm going to be kind of my own law firm within a law firm. Say, well, you came here also for a reason. Try and learn a little bit from me, right? Try and understand that these systems have worked, and they've brought me to the point of being able to prosecute a case successfully because I followed these methodologies.
Right, and we're making a promise. Like when we, you to the public and to other lawyers, because you get referrals from other lawyers,
Sure.
and me to other lawyers when they refer a case, that we're promising we're going to deliver a certain quality, and the only way we can ensure we have that quality is to do the steps that need to be done.
And the way that I've had this conversation with lawyers, I'll say, hey, McDonald's, for example, is one of the most successful, fast food operations in the world. Do you really think they just allow their client, they hire an employee and say, oh, you've worked at other restaurants or fast food places for 5 or 6 years, so just go ahead and come behind the register and do your own thing? That's not the way it works. I mean, they're delivering service or delivering, attitude, personality. They're delivering, the way that you present the product, the way that you deliver the product, the way that you interact with customers. All of that is very systematic, and it's. I don't want to compare making hamburgers to our law profession, but what I'm saying is that systematic approach to case handling is what drives quality, and it's what prevents issues from happening in your files.
And you say it's, the McDonald's has systems, but I guarantee you go to the French Laundry in Yountville, California, where you're going to spend with wine, $1,000 a person easy.
Yeah.
And when you go, if you go once, you go a year later, your oysters and pearls dish, which is a little oyster and caviar and stuff, is going to be exactly the same. And your plate's going to look exactly the same, and everybody gets served at the same time, and the service is impeccable. That's not an accident. That's not telling cooks, well, you're a good cook, here's the recipe, do it. They are very regimented. I mean, it's not just the low end, it's the high end, and that's how we get quality. And again, the lawyers at my firm that have embraced it have found that then that really frees them up to get creative, to do the special things, to get the great recoveries, because the little things are getting done.
That's right.
So at some point, you decided to go into advertising. And I want to talk to you a little bit because, a lot of people I see, including myself, try advertising. Most of us don't succeed like you have. So tell me a little bit about, what it takes to be successful with an advertising practice, and kind of what the pain curve on the way to success is like.
I will tell you that what I thought worked in advertising 4 years ago is very different from my perspective today. And alternatively, what I thought was great 8 years ago, I thought was very different from what I thought 4 years ago, and certainly today. And so it's an evolving type of perspective on advertising. I think that the barriers to entry in our profession have grown and grown and grown significantly for lots of different other reasons as well. But the era of the mega firm, where you're having statewide players capture huge percentages of the market, is now becoming the norm. Something you didn't really quite see as much.
So you think if someone just puts up 3 or 4 billboards, that it's going to be effective?
And that's unfortunately no. And so what I would tell people is, you want to be dominant in one area of marketing. How do you distinguish yourself to your audience, and how do you become the go-to person in that audience? And so if you don't have the money to spend, go into a market, do a market competitive analysis, and say, okay, the average PI lawyer in San Antonio, as an example, is spending $3-4 million a year. How do I come into this market as a lawyer and compete with that? Well, unless you have that kind of money, you're not going to be able to compete in a broad general market. But where you can compete is if you find your niche, and if you find an area that is not being really pounced on in a general market. And so if someone is out there listening to this podcast, right, and you're saying, okay, I've got maybe a $50,000 budget a year and I'm willing to spend it, how can I spend those dollars? Make yourself unique. So here, for example, there was a guy that didn't spend a lot of money, but he was very successful. I think he got prosecuted for other crimes, but there was a guy, he was called the DWI dude.
Yeah.
And he had dreadlocks. And that was his deal, and that was his cool image. There's a guy out of Florida that I saw, and he's called the Jewish lawyer. And that's his deal.
There's Simmons and Fletcher in Houston. They're the Christian trial lawyers, and they advertise during Joel Osteen's program.
That's it. And they probably dominate that program.
Yeah.
Right? There's people that maybe want to appeal to a more conservative audience. And so maybe, go to talk radio and say, what are my competitors spending in talk radio for this particular segment, time of the day, and be dominant in that one area and own that one area. And you will build on that in the future, little by little.
But even once you do that, what is the journey like from spending the money that you need to spend to dominate? Because if you're not dominant, you're just going to get the trash that nobody else wants, basically. Right. So there is a time period between you're going to start spending the money you need to build your brand awareness, to start getting the cases, to then getting the cases, then to having the cases actually fund, because cases are cash flow negative until they fund. What is that journey like?
A painful one, right? Because and let's just assume that you're very successful. You come in and you have $1 million to spend, and you sign up, in a smaller market, and you sign up a bunch of cases after spending $1 million. Those cases are not going to come to fruition for 1.5 years, 2 years. But in the meantime, you're also having to work those cases, which means having to invest in personnel and people and systems and case funding, anything from medical prepayments to an orthopedic surgeon to funding surgeries to paying rental cars to paying people to do all that work. And so it is a very, very, very painful situation where you're having to not only invest to get the cases, but then invest in the cases, and it's kind of like a double whammy.
So you really have to, I guess, build up reserves and then delay gratification and not pay yourself much of the money for a while.
That's right. But the biggest trick to advertising, in my view, is how do you differentiate yourself to become top mind awareness in any one segment, and that is really a very hard code to crack. How do you become the person that someone will call in case of an incident or accident? I learned the hard way a few years ago. I spent a lot of money on a focus group in one of my markets to determine what was driving people, what were the top concerns for potential clients to call lawyers. And we spent like $50,000 on doing focus groups, testing a message that we wanted to use, and an image that we wanted to use, and a brand that we wanted to use. And of course, that also meant testing competitors. And I'll give you an example of a competitor that we heard of a lot in a focus group, and he's passed away now, but Brian Longcar, the strong arm. And so people would say, well, we would call the strong arm, and the folks running the focus group would say, great, what's the guy's name? They wouldn't be able to tell you their name. Well, how would you go about looking for the strong arm? Well, we just Google the strong arm, right? Same thing for Jim Adler. They'll say, well, we would call the Texas Hammer. So why do you want to call the Texas Hammer? What are the attributes? Well, he looks tough on TV, and we'll say, well, what's Mr. Hammer's name, right? And they couldn't. 90% of them couldn't tell you their name, but they're going to call this lawyer, this professional, will handle this very important case for them. And so we realized. Then we asked questions like, "Did you care? Do you care if he's ever tried a case, or what his results have been, or whether he's board certified?" We wanted to understand what were important for people, and you would be surprised. All they cared about was recall. Recall was the number one reason people call lawyers, and that would equate to top mind awareness.
And so if someone doesn't have the millions of dollars to dominate a market like San Antonio, Houston, you'd recommend just finding a niche that someone can try to dominate. And maybe, are there ways other than advertising that like TV or internet?
Absolutely. One of the best ways that you can generate cases, and I see there's a very good friend of mine, lawyer in Dallas. Every single time he touches a human being he doesn't know, he gives him a business card. I don't care if it's a waiter. Great service today. Here's my card. I'm an injury lawyer, and if you ever need anything, please give me a call. He does that daily, 8-10 times a day. He's been doing it for 10 years. The guy's highly successful. Yeah. Any cab he gets into, any Uber he gets into, he's always giving his card out. That adds up, builds up over the years. The second thing is becoming part of organizations, whether it's becoming the go-to guy at a large church congregation, becoming the go-to guy at the Boys and Girls Club of America, or whatever. Anytime you have a large congregation of people in a membership in some kind of society, if you establish yourself within that organization as a leader, as someone that people can come to for legal assistance, you'll be surprised how many folks in that community will not only go to you, but will also refer you friends, family members, etc.
A lot of our listeners are up-and-coming lawyers who are building practices. What advice do you have as someone that's now climbed the ladder and reached the pinnacles of success? What advice do you have for those who are coming up that want to get there too?
I have something. There's a saying. People come to me and ask me this question all the time. How did you get to where you were? And and people always ask me, was it luck? Was it hard work? And my response is, it's funny how the harder at work at something, the luckier I become. And there is no substitution for hard work, and there is absolutely no substitution for putting in the hours, putting in the effort into becoming great. If you become great, if you love what you do, and if you're good at it, success will follow.
And I don't think it's luck, because for every case where you and I have gotten lucky on a case, we've also had a number of cases where we had bad things happen on a case, and we had to get bruised and bloodied and dirty and just get back up and get right back out there and do it again.
Yeah. There is no case without fleas. I don't care if you're representing a busload of nuns, all right? You're going to have problems with that case. And I'll tell you, Mike, I don't consider myself to be one of the smartest guys in the room, but I'll tell you that I will work my butt off. And if we were to compare, I guarantee you that when I go to trial, I've outworked those lawyers. I've outprepared those lawyers more out of necessity, because things don't come to me easy. So I do have to spend a lot of time preparing, practicing, putting in that grunt work to make sure that I can beat those opponents.
And when I've worked on cases with you, I've seen the 1, 2, 3 a.m. emails that prove that that's true.
Yeah.
Well, Alex, I've really enjoyed talking to you. Congratulations on all your success, and I hope our listeners can take some of your wisdom and have great success themselves.
Well, thank you, Mike. Really enjoyed it as well.
Thank you for joining us on Trial Lawyer Nation. I enjoyed my conversation with Alex Begum, and I hope you guys enjoyed listening to it. We love the support we're getting from the show. We love hearing from y'all. So if you guys can just keep contacting us via email at podcast@triallawyernation.com, or contact us on our Facebook page. Tell us what your favorite episode was, how you heard about us, topics you want to hear more about, or guests you'd like us to have on the show. Thanks for tuning in, and I look forward to having you with us next time on Trial Lawyer Nation.
Each year, the law firm of Cowen, Rodriguez, Peacock pays millions of dollars in co-counsel fees to attorneys nationwide. Are you an attorney with a catastrophic injury or wrongful death case you'd like to discuss with host Michael Cowen? If so, you can reach Michael by calling 210-941-1301 or send an email to michael@cowenlaw.com. We look forward to talking with you again soon as we continue to explore powerful insights from our amazing host and remarkable guests here on Trial Lawyer Nation. Until then, please be sure to subscribe and review this podcast on iTunes or your favorite listening app so we can continue to reach more listeners. Visit us at www.triallawyernation.com to send us a message, listen to previous podcasts, or learn more about Michael Cowen and our guests. This podcast has been hosted by Michael Cowen and is not intended to, nor does it create the attorney-client privilege between our hosts, guests, or contributors and any listener for any reason. Content from the podcast is not to be interpreted as legal advice. All thoughts and opinions expressed herein are only those from which they came.